Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Tim here with the TMA Connection. It's your local real estate podcast that is focusing on people that are making a difference in the lives of others. And we got a big difference maker here today, not just in attitude, but in stature. A giant. He's an executive coach and a speaker. He's a host of the Cannonball Mindset podcast. He's interviewed people like Gary Vaynerchuk, Jesse Itzler, Matt Frazier, some gold medal Olympians like Missy Franklin, Jordan Harbinger. I mean, all these really cool people that I really look up to, and you've met him, which is awesome. And he's just put out a book called "Keep Telling Yourself: Shift Your Story and Create a Life of Abundance." Ladies and gentlemen, Chad Sanschagrin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim. This is awesome. This is a great setup. I really appreciate you. I've been watching your show, so it's incredible to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I read this book, and I read it again. I mean, I read a lot of books, and I can genuinely say that this one is a true masterpiece of something that a lot of people should be reading. And when I first read it, been following you for a while, when I first read it, I was like, this. It was almost, for me, it was almost like a spiritual moment where there's things going on in my head and going through my life, and this spoke to me.
Yeah,
and it really felt good that I could connect with what you were saying in the book, and had to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wrote the book that I needed the most, and what I mean by that is, I was trying to figure out my whole life, what was the cause and effect of when I was successful, when I was not successful, when I was in the ditch, when I was not in the ditch. And what I came to, and this is over years, I'm 51 years old, so this is a 51-year journey to realize the cause and effect of my life was that the highs and the lows were all predicated on the stories I told myself. What was the narratives? And then I started figuring out that I was the narrator of I was the storyteller.
Right.
But I didn't realize that. I thought circumstance dictated the story. Well, no, I dictated the story on how I perceived things. And when I realized that I had the power to write my own story, I wanted to stop writing stories of victimhood and start writing stories of victorhood. And my life changed when I realized I held the pen. And I know that sounds like very maybe hokey or Pollyanna, but it really is the truth, is that when you realize that you are the author of your life, what you also realize is that you can write a plot twist in whenever you want.
Sure.
That you can really dictate the trajectory of your life by learning how to write better stories.
I've been so fascinated by people that have achieved some level of greatness, and yet they've come from something so small, so small.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like growing up? Because I mean, you went through a lot in your book about your lack of college education. You went through the relationship that you had with your mother and father, and what happened with your father. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the thing is, my childhood, looking back on perspective now, was amazing. Like the circumstances I was in. What I mean by that is I had a loving mother. I had an absent father. My father left when I was 5, didn't see him again until I was 40. But instead of looking at that story, and I talk about this in the book, instead of looking at that situation and going, I lost a father, but I gained aunts. My mother's the oldest of 15 kids. I'm the second oldest of 49 grandchildren. So I was surrounded by loving family all the time. We didn't have a lot of money, but instead of looking at what I'd gained, all I was fixated on was what I lost. And what I lost had created this victim mentality. So I went through life with this entire chip on my shoulder that said I just wasn't enough. And it was the easiest get out of jail free card.
Sure.
Because sympathy, when people feel sorry for you, they don't push you. And this is why most people don't need sympathy in their life. They need empathy, which is a totally different emotion. I wasn't getting empathy. I was getting sympathy. And sympathy was, it's okay, Chad. We feel bad for you because you don't have a father. So when I didn't do my homework, or I didn't study, well, I didn't have a father. I was the victim. And so I lived in this victim state, which just grew and grew and grew. And I would learn that the more I was a victim, the more sympathy I got, the less pressure I was, or less people poured into me to make me better. Because when you feel sorry for somebody, you don't make them better. You just feel sorry for them. You keep them stuck where they are. And so I created this victim mentality that followed me through my whole life. And it wasn't until I started realizing that I was tired of being the victim. I graduated high school with a 1.6 grade point average. And that really was a gift. Like I didn't deserve a 1.6. They just felt bad. Like they got to get this, because I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't getting in trouble in the sense I wasn't breaking laws. I wasn't like getting tattoos on my face. I wasn't doing anything. I was just victimized. And so it wasn't at all, people change for one or two reasons, either desperation or inspiration. And I was at the point of desperation. And when you finally get desperate enough, God will put somebody in front of you that inspires you. And that's where I saw my wife. And that convergence of desperation and inspiration is exactly what I needed to start my shift. And we talk about shift being see how I find truth moments. And I found truth that maybe I was worthy of something more than being the victim and the victim in my story. And maybe God created me to be the lead actor in my own story. And once I realized that, everything changed.
That's amazing. Very similar to your childhood was my childhood too, where I just wasn't a great student and didn't do anything criminal or anything like that, but I could have maybe gotten busted a few times for some things. Or whatever,
right. I just didn't get caught.
I just never got caught. I was smart enough not to get caught. But it wasn't until I started telling myself a different story when I did eventually go back to college to become a teacher, where this C, D, and E student now all of a sudden is straight A's. Like I went to Towson and got a 4.0 GPA.
Wow.
To get my teaching degree, and it's like, well, what changed? And it was that ultimately that narrative that you're telling yourself.
Yeah. People think that it's like I think people honestly believe, well, they just caught a lucky break, or they, things just the circumstances started to change, and it's not the circumstances that change, it's you that changes or don't change. And I think part of the time is, I look at my life now, and I have two amazing kids, I have an amazing life, I have a great podcast, I wrote a book, and now I have this belief where I said this early on in an interview today that it never dawns on me anymore that I can't do something. Where most of my life, it never dawned on me that I could do something. And it was just this fundamental shift, because now I feel empowered to write my own story. And we talk about that a lot, but what I mean by the stories is, we have this, everybody has this voice inside their head. And every human has this voice inside their head. And everybody that's listening to this goes, I don't have a voice inside my head. Well, that's the voice inside your head. The one that just told you don't have a voice, that's the voice inside your damn head, right? Everybody has this voice inside the head. And it can be your greatest ally, or you can be your greatest adversary. And so my voice is still there, but my voice has become my cheerleader now. My voice has become my motivator now. Before, my voice was my biggest adversary. Because every time I said I wanted to do something, it was, man, come on. You don't even have a father. Come on, you're not smart enough. Come on, you're 6'8". You're goofy and you're lanky, and nobody loves you, and you like everything became from this negative state.
Right.
And so now the voice is still there, but now I've learned how to use the voice as a motivator. Learned how to use the voice as inspiration rather than something that keeps me in the ditch. And I think that once you realize that, everything in your life can change. And so when I wrote the book, because I still need the book. I still need the book. Like this is my how-to guide, and I haven't got to the point in my life where I'm so good at it that I don't need to go back and say, man, what's the story I'm telling myself? I wear several bracelets, but one of the bracelets that never comes off my wrist, it hasn't come off my wrist in 10 years. And some have broken, I had to replace it, but there's not been a day in 10 years I have not worn this bracelet. And all it says is, I am enough. And that's a constant reminder of when I feel not enough. I have to look down at my bracelet and just recite those words to myself. I'm speaking at in a couple of weeks, I'm speaking at the Super Bowl. I'm speaking at the Masters. I mean, literally back-to-back months.
Wow.
I'm speaking at the Super Bowl and the Masters. The guy who had and I don't say that to impress you, but to impress upon you. I had a 1.6 grade point average. I was a victim. I have all these negative things. But there's no doubt that when I'm at these events at the Super Bowl, that before I walk into the room, the critic is going to get loud. Mm-hmm. And that voice in my head is going to start trying to tell me, not enough. But now I realize I control that voice. I look down at my brace and I'm like, no, I'm enough. And all of a sudden, that voice, that cheerleader kicks right back into gear and gets me in the right state of mind. It's not that the critic ever leaves. It's how do you silence the critic?
That's probably the first thing that I connected with in your book is when you started talking about imposter syndrome and that voice that starts to talk, that starts to speak. And being in the real estate industry, there are highs and there are lows. And man, wouldn't it be great if everything could just be a level, smooth ride? But it's not. And there's just constant doubt and anxiety. And how can I try to limit that? Because I know it never helps. Number one. Number two, it always seems to come together.
Always.
You know, it always seems to work out. Even it's funny because like when you're on vacation, you're thinking about work. When you're at work, you're like, I want to be on vacation.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
How can we be more present in the moment and where our feet are on a given day and on any given day?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to start by saying, this idea of adversity and these ups and downs. To me, I used to look at this as like, I have this, I do this exercise, it's called the lifeline. Mm-hmm. And I talk a little bit about it in the book. And the lifeline is, I started this 10 years ago. And what I did 10 years ago, I sat down at the end of the year and I drew a straight line on a sheet of paper. And I put from birth until at that point I was 40 years old, right? And I just charted all my memories that I had, the positive and negative memories, right? So this is your baseline. If it was a positive memory, I made a little mark up here and wrote what it was. It was a negative memory, I wrote it down here. And I tried to do it in chronological order. Like I was like, how old was I? So my first memory that I remember as a kid was an incident with my father running over this ice cream truck, right? And I talk about this in the book. And it was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, and it was a traumatic moment. And now you look back as an adult, you go, come on, that was your ice cream truck got run over. It's not that traumatic. But as a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, it's the end of the world, right? Yeah. And so I marked this and it's a negative. But then I remember moving to my grandparents in Maryland, and there was some high points because I got to go to summer camp, which that's what I remember. Okay. I remember. And I charted that up here. And so you do this for your whole life, and it takes a while, and it's very emotional because you're reflecting on both positive and negative emotions, the experiences that happened in your life. But the number one thing about experts in any field is they're able to recognize patterns. So Tony Robbins told me this. Tony said, Chad, the number one thing about experts in your life is that they're able to recognize patterns and see things as they are and see what's going to happen. And so when you look at this lifeline, you start to realize that there's some patterns. And the patterns are that my highs were always followed by some lows at some point. And my lows were always followed by some highs. When I looked at this lifeline, and every year, I did that when I was 40, and every year since then, I've added to this lifeline. So now I have it from birth to 51. I'm 51 years old. I just did it, at the beginning of this year, I added to my lifeline. And as I look at this sheet of paper, what I realize is maybe the lows in the now don't seem as low as they were in the moment. So I got to have the right viewpoint when I'm in the ditch, right? I'm gonna get out of it. I already know I've survived 100% of every ditch I've ever been in because I'm still sitting here today.
It's proof.
It's proof. It's actual data to say you're gonna make this through. So now I'm like, all right, I'm in a ditch right now. I clearly recognize, and this year in 2024, while the outside perspective was Chad is killing it, my book came out, hit a bestseller list. I ran the London Marathon. I ran the Tokyo Marathon. I did all these things, right? My business was booming. My podcast was booming. My external success was not equaling my internal peace. And I was in a ditch for a long period of time. And I knew that I was going to get out of the ditch because history had told me I was going to get out of the ditch. So when you know you're going to get out of the ditch, you stop worrying about why you're in the ditch and figure out, how am I going to get out of the ditch? Because I know I'm going to get out, so why prolong this? And so sometimes that's a quick, just mindset change. Sometimes it's a completely behavior change. Sometimes a circumstance change. But having that exercise, I realized that there's no way my highs are as high if it wasn't for my lows. It was my lows that made my highs feel better. It was the lows that made me feel like I know how hard I worked in 2024 to get out of the ditch, which makes me so much more appreciation that I'm here. I had a lot of health problems. I'm getting ready to run this year. I'm going to run the New York Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, and the Sydney, Australia Marathon in 3 marathons, 6 weeks. And I can tell you from where I was in health-wise in 2024, do you know how I can already tell you how gratifying those marathons. I've run 54 marathons. Those marathons are going to be so gratifying because of what I went through to get there.
Right.
And so people you have all this negative things. Nobody wants to be in the ditch, but if it wasn't for the ditches, you have no context for the highs.
Clip that, clip that, make that a reel, because I need to listen. I need to hear that time and time again. Sometimes. I mean, just again, to be able to appreciate the good times, you have to go through some of the mud. You have to go through some of the bad times.
Yeah, and if you don't, there's I think it was in the 1950s. They decided that they were going to build this biodome, this biosphere, and I want to say it was like 10 acres. They basically cordoned off this 10 acres of land, and they built this huge biodome. And they were going to see how people could live in this biodome or biosphere, whatever it's called, because they wanted to simulate what it'd be like to have life on other planets.
Okay.
It was a huge study. And so they were going to cultivate all their foods. They were going to do all this stuff in this biosome. Well, what they realized was the trees inside the sphere were growing at an exponential rate. They were like shooting up. They were growing faster than any tree outside the dome, and they couldn't figure out why. But they were studying and studying. But what they also realized was as fast as they were growing, they were falling over at rates they should have never fell over. Like they were dying fast. They were just falling over.
Right.
And they couldn't figure out why. And so they did all these studies on why these trees were falling over and why they weren't surviving. And what they realized was because inside the dome, there was no wind. And in order for trees to grow deep roots, they need really, really strong winds. And that's us as humans. In order for us to really survive and thrive, we need the winds. We need the challenges, because it's in the challenges that we strengthen our roots. So we curse the challenges and we applaud the rewards, but those rewards are only possible because of those challenges.
Right.
And so for me, it's not that you openly welcome putting yourself in the ditch. But now in my life, when things are easy, I make them harder. Because when they become easy, I become complacent. When I become complacent, I don't grow, and nothing good happens from that.
It's like that book, Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh, yeah. He's a great guy.
Embracing the struggle.
Oh, my God. He was on my podcast. He's a good guy. He spoke at my conference. Really good guy. And if you listen to anything he says, he talks about stoicism, but that's exactly what it is. He talks about embracing the struggle. He talks about, these struggles. Marcus Aurelius talks about it's the struggles that make the man.
Yeah.
And, he's mastered that thought, but I think that he's right. Like, I used to curse all the struggles, but there's no way I'm sitting here today if it wasn't for all of those struggles I had in my life. And most of them are self-induced, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't struggle because somebody else made me struggle. I'm making myself struggle.
It was a story you were telling yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Wow. Talk about the difference between achievement and betterment.
Yeah. This is a big one for me.
I love that.
Yeah. So what I believe, when we talk about a lot in the book, is that achievement without betterment is just for the ego. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. So about 7 years ago, I was given a talk. I was in Portugal, and I was given a talk on mindset. And it was about, 500 business executives, and I felt really, really powerful because it was the first talk I had done internationally. There were translators there. It was all these business executives, and I'm talking about mindset, and I'm talking about how powerful your mindset is, and that once you believe it, you can achieve it. Kind of like a throwaway line. I was like, if I believed I could run a marathon, I could do it. Well, I'd never run in my life. And so I was like, I said, I'm going to run a marathon. But I only wanted to run a marathon to tell people I ran a marathon. It wasn't to get better. It wasn't to achieve anything. I just wanted the medal.
Okay.
So I do no training. I do no training. I don't change my diet. I don't change my health. And I show up. I run the New York City Marathon. Never ran a 5K, never ran a half marathon, never ran anything. I show up I get into the New York City Marathon. on lottery.
Right.
On lottery. I show up on November 3rd at the Verrazano Bridge with 60,000 people, and I run the New York City Marathon. It was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. I ran, I crawled, I puked, I cried like 30 times. But I finished it. I finished it in 6 hours, 5 hours and 59 minutes. But it didn't matter that I had all this pain, because now I could say I was a marathon runner.
Yeah.
This total need to be seen as complete ego driven.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I had the medal, and only 1% of people run a marathon. So I finished the marathon. I'm never doing that shit again. I'm never, ever going to run a marathon again, ever, the rest of my life.
Yep.
But I wore that medal around like I was Flavor Flav. I mean, I was the cool. My wife's like, please don't wear it to church, Chad. I'm like, I'm wearing it everywhere, right? And it was totally ego driven. I wasn't a better person. I hadn't changed, but I had an achievement. And so doing this process, my brother and some friends were like, oh, we're going to run the New York City. They saw me run it. They came up to support me. We're going to run it. But and I'm like, come on, I couldn't. My ego couldn't allow them to run it, because then they would have what I had, and I had to have more achievement than they. Right? So I sign up second year, but I don't get in on lottery. So I write a check for a charity to get in, $2,500. I don't train. I don't do any of the work. I'm just going to do it again. Now they train, they change their habits, they become better, they become healthier. They run the marathon, it takes them 4.5 hours, takes me 5 hours and 45 minutes. And I finish the marathon, I'm by myself because they finish an hour and a half ahead of me. But it doesn't matter, because I have two medals, they only have one, right? Total ego driven. So when you finish the New York City Marathon, there's about a mile after the finish line that you have to walk out by yourself to get to where you like it's at least a mile to get out of the corrals to go back to where your family is. Okay. And it's like Night of the Living Dead, because people are like, especially at the time that I was finishing, it was all the slow people that were like dying. They weren't professional marathon runners. And so like I'm walking out and I have this shift moment. I swear it was a God moment. And I was like, what did I just do? Like here, I'm such a fraud, because I'm standing on stage telling people to invest in themselves, make them better. But I'm solely doing this for my ego. I haven't gotten better. I haven't inspired anybody. I'm an imposter. And I'm like, I'm doing it again. I'm gonna do it again. But this time, I'm gonna do it for the right reasons. I'm gonna do the right thing for the right reasons. And I do it because I wanna see what I'm actually capable of. And so I sign up a third time. But this time, I hire a coach, I train, I eat better, I change the entire, everything about me, I change. I become version 2.0 in discipline. I become version 2.0 in health. I become version 2.0 in all things betterment. So I go on the third try to run the New York City Marathon. I'm there by myself. My family is there, but nobody else running it with me. Yeah. It's just me. There's 1 million people. When you run the New York City Marathon, there's 1 million to 2 million people on the sidelines of the New York City Marathon. It's the greatest sporting event of all time. And they're cheering you on. I put headphones in. I stay in the center of the street. I don't care about any of that. All I care about is putting all the work I've done for the last year, changing who I was, discipline, following the path, following the process, and to run this marathon. I run it in 4 hours and 25 minutes, 4 hours and 15 minutes. I take an hour and 30 minutes off my time. Yep. I crossed the finish line. It was the least climactic of all the marathons I had run. And the reason why is because it was no longer about the medal. I had a room full of empty medals, but I was the same person. Yeah. Now I had a medal, but it didn't matter about the medal because I had become better. I wasn't the same version of myself. And so achievement is great, but the problem with achievement is if you're only fixated on achievement, the feeling you get from achieving something will last a moment.
Temporary, very temporary.
But the feeling you get from becoming version 2.0 in your life, and I'm on this, and what I mean by that is version 2.0 life in things that matter. So, I'm a father of twin 20-year-old daughters. If I remained the same father that I was when they were born, I'd become obsolete in their life. I have to evolve as a father. I have to evolve as a husband. I have to evolve as a speaker. I have to evolve as a business owner. And so when you set yourself on betterment, just being better in the areas of your life that matter most, you'll achieve so much more than you will ever have thought about if you just set out for achievement. So there's nothing wrong with achievement, but most of the time, if you're just looking to achieve something without the idea of how does it better me, then you're doing it for ego's sake. And if that's what you want, great, but just know that. Right? For me, I don't care about achievement anymore. Achievement will be the byproduct of me becoming a better human being, a better Christian, a better father, a better husband, a better speaker, all those things. I'll achieve more than I could ever possibly imagine.
You know, I feel that, like, especially in a numbers-driven industry like sales, in real estate, you know, you think that when you get to that point where you sell X amount of homes or you sell X amount of sales volume, it's like you get there and then it's like, okay. Now what?
What's next?
What's next?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why most people ask themselves, I think most people ask themselves the wrong questions. I think the quality of your life is predicated on the questions you ask yourself. If you ask yourself better questions, you'll have a better life. And so I asked myself victimhood questions forever, and I had a victim life. I asked myself victor questions, I have a victor life. And so I think most people, they say, what do I want to achieve this year? So if you're talking about real estate, they say, what do I want to achieve? They've set a goal. They say, I want to achieve 50 sales this year. I want to sell $20 million, whatever it might be, right? I think the question they should be asking is not what do I want to achieve, but who do I want to become? Who do I want to become this year? Well, I want to become a better real estate agent. All right, well, tell me more about that. Well, I want to become a better closer. I want to become a better prospector. I want to become a better marketer. Well, if you become better, let's use it in the real estate world, if you become a better prospector, if you become a better marketer, if you become a better closer, if you become better at those things, the outcome will take care of itself. You will achieve more than you could ever possibly imagine. You got to divorce the outcome and fall in love with the behavior of becoming better.
Right.
And if you do that, you're on a growth path. And if you're on a growth path, you'll achieve more than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I really feel like the daily activities that if we could just focus on maximizing today and today only, and not worry about what's going on in the future, that's anxiety producing.
That's right.
Don't worry about the past. That's, you know, that can make you depressed.
That's exactly right.
Can we maximize the habits, the rituals, the activities that drive growth on a daily basis is where I need to put my mind. More often than not.
Yeah. What am I doing today? What am I doing today that's helping me become who I want to become? How is this? And I do it with everything. I used to listen to like all different types of music. I would listen to rap music. I would listen to country music. I would listen to rock music. I would listen to Christian music. And even things like that, I now ask myself, how is this music serving me today? And what I mean by that is, you know, your brain is taking in all these senses. Whether you know it or not, it's constantly taking in all this information. Well, if I'm listening to lyrics of songs that are negative, I'm allowing it past the keeper. I only listen to Christian music now. You know why I only listen to Christian music? Because there's nothing negative in it.
There's nothing negative.
There's nothing negative in it, right? Even if I'm not listening to it, it is on because I want it into my subconscious. I want only positive things around me. I can honestly say there is not one person in my life right now, not one, that is negative. Not one. There's not. If I see somebody negative on social media, I immediately unfollow. I don't care who it is. If it's my mother, I'm unfollowing you. It's not my mother. But it's immediately because I can't allow any of that into my daily practice. Everything I do has a purpose, to serve a purpose, for me to live out my purpose.
Yeah. You were talking about in the book, too, there's 2 rules of energy that you have. And the one rule that you just mentioned was to get those things out of your life.
It's hard. That is hard. That's harder than imagined, because people say, well, they're my family. Well, they're my friends. Well, I realized that I have family and I have relatives. I can push family really far away, right? I can push relatives really far away, I should say. My family I keep close. The idea, though, it doesn't matter. If you are toxic, if you are an energy vampire, you have to stay away from me. But the other part of that is, what I didn't realize until a lot older in life was, I have a moral obligation to make sure I leave any interaction, any room, with better energy than I found it. Because there's times that I can be the energy vampire. I find myself at times, and even now, and this isn't like a revelation where I'm like a perfect now. I find myself, I'm the owner of this company where I could walk into my office and I could be the energy vampire, and I got to check myself. I'm like, listen, I'm draining the energy out of this room. I need to go back outside and re-walk in. Right. And it's a moral obligation I believe I have to make sure that every human being that I'm around, I leave them with more energy than before I came into the room.
Well, you're bringing the energy today, that's for sure. I'm curious.
Yeah.
There are things that happen in our past that people hang on as far as part of their story, or who they've become and stuff like that. How do you recommend somebody that's maybe stuck in something in the past? How do they give themselves grace or forgiveness for something that has happened? You can't do a dang thing about it. It was wrong.
That's right.
How can we reframe that to help us be more successful and have a better mindset now?
Yeah, really, really great question. And that is, for me, it's question it. Question the past. We don't fact check our stories. Mm-hmm. I believed that this thing happened with my father when I was 5 years old. Mm-hmm. It dictated my entire life. It dictated every interaction of every life. It was the basis of all the trauma in my life. All the victimhood came from this one situation with my father.
Right. When he ran over your ice cream truck.
When he ran over this ice cream truck, right? And people listen to this going, what's this guy talking about? He ran over the ice cream truck. I'm like, if you read this book, you'll understand. This is a traumatic event, right? Everything changed at this one moment. Fast forward 35 years, 40 years, my grandfather dies, and I see my father again for the first time in 40 years. Oh. I come home, I tell my mother about it. My mother is one of the most amazing human beings ever. I've never heard my mother utter a negative word. I've never heard her talk bad about my father. Nothing, ever. We've never discussed my father. And in a positive or negative light. And so I tell her that I see him. She's asking about it. And I said, he wasn't what I expected. And she said, well, what did you expect? And I told her, and she said, well, why would you expect that? I said, because what he did to my ice cream truck. And she said, what are you talking about? And what I realized in that conversation with my mother was that story I made up wasn't even true.
Right.
And I'm like,
the timeline of it all.
The timeline and how it happened and what my father did and how he reacted. I lived by a rule and a story that a 4-year-old kid concocted without ever knowing it was true. So I think if you're holding on to something from your past, first you got to question it. Mm-hmm. Is it true? Is it serving me anymore? Mm-hmm. And how do I take this and how do I, instead of looking at it through the perspective of it's dragging me down in my life, how do I look at it into the perspective of it's building me up who I am? You don't get to rip out, if I take this book and I rip out chapter 3, well, I don't have the same book. You don't get to have the same, you don't get to rip out a chapter of your life and have the same life. And so you have to appreciate all of those. If you walk into my office, we have an office in Bel Air or in Falston, and if you walk down the hallway, there's a picture of me as a kid, and it is the only picture I have of me as a child that accurately depicts how I felt. Broken, ashamed, full of fear and regret and remorse. It was just like the perfect picture of me. And I didn't see it until I was later on. Like I saw it probably 10 years ago. It was the first time I saw this picture. But it actually captured exactly how I felt in my life, broken. And under it is a gold plaque, and it says who I was. And you walk about a couple more feet, and there's a picture of me running an early race after one of my first public conferences. There's 100 people behind me. I'm smiling from ear to ear, and my arms are spread open wide, and it was one of those great moments in my life that the photographer had just captured. There's a gold plaque under that, and it says who I am. And then you walk a couple of feet further, and there's a picture I had taken on an early morning run, and all it was a picture of my shadow. And this picture of my shadow hangs in my office, right? So you have who I was, who I am, and under this one, with the shadow, there's a gold plaque that says who I'm becoming. And in order to have fulfillment in your life and to understand, how to move forward in your life, you have to forgive the version of you that you were. You have to love the version that you are, and you have to be obsessed about becoming the version of you that you're going to become. I'm obsessed with that. And so the clear denominator, the clear similarity between all three of them is you better learn to love all of them because they all played a part. And so I can't wish away what happened to me when I was a kid, because if I did, I don't have the same life. I don't have my kids. I'm not sitting here today. If I grew up in a normal, loving, whatever normal is, loving two-family relationship, white picket fence and a dog, I probably would have got better grades in school. I probably would have went to high school. I probably would have went to college. I most likely would have become a teacher. Great, no problem with that, right? I would love to have been a history teacher.
Okay.
Right? I'd probably have an okay life, but that's what wasn't God's path for me. And so I can't curse this version of me that offers me the rewards I have in my life today, and the rewards being the contribution, the rewards being my wife, the rewards. If I have that, I'm not sitting down here with you today.
Right.
And so, because I don't write the book. And if I don't write the book, so every dot connects, and I think that we have to question the past and move on and forgive ourselves for it, but love ourselves for it as well.
Yeah. Gratitude journals, pride journals.
Oh, yeah.
Love this because you hear so much about gratitude, and it is a positive thing.
Yeah.
But gratitude's focusing on an external element.
Yeah.
Talk more about that.
Yeah,
That was beautiful.
I'm a very grateful person. I have a ton of gratitude for everything in my life. But I think gratitude is overblown, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. But let me explain what I mean by this. Gratitude is not the duct tape of emotions. It doesn't fix everything. Matter of fact, gratitude is the worst emotion you can have if you want motivation. If you want to be motivated, if you want to get better, gratitude is not the emotion to do that. Because gratitude gives you appreciation for what you have externally. If I say, what are you grateful for? Well, I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for my job. That's awesome. If you're struggling with happiness, gratitude, a sign of gratitude. But if you're struggling with motivation, if you're struggling with self-love, gratitude is not the emotion for self-love. Pride is the emotion for self-love.
Yeah.
Because most people will keep a gratitude journal and they'll feel happier, but it won't move them forward.
Okay.
If I want to be motivated, I want to be proud. And what I mean by that is pride in the sense of, and I'm not talking about pride before God. I'm not talking about ego. Ego stands for edging God out. I have more pride. It's not about God. It's about me. Right? Yep. I'm talking about I'm proud of what I've done. And so a lot of people, they become their worst critic and they have no pride in what they've done. And so for me, keep a gratitude journal if you're struggling with happiness. But if you're struggling with motivation, you want to figure out if you want self-love, then every day write down what you did today that you're proud of, because pride is about you. It's internal. I'm proud that I was invited to sit down here with you today. I'm proud of the fact that I showed up. I'm proud of the fact that, I had a really tough conversation with one of my clients today. I'm really proud of the fact that I'm able to go on vacation tomorrow morning with my wife. I'm really proud of the fact that I created a life that I'm able to go on vacation with my so pride is about the cause and effect of what you've done in your life. And most people, if you want motivation, the best type of motivation is intrinsic motivation. They're looking for extrinsic motivation, so outside sources. But intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from within. And the greatest form of intrinsic motivation is pride. Because when I feel proud about what I'm doing, I'll do more of it. And the reason is, a couple reasons. One is biology. When you feel proud, your brain creates a whole bunch of chemicals. It creates dopamine, it creates serotonin, it creates all these oxytocin, all these chemicals. And I'll give you an example. If you go through a drive-through right now and you say, I'm going to pay for the person behind me, right? Just you have this moment like, man, I'm going to pay for it. I've had a good day. I'm going to pay for it. So you pay for this person's drink behind you. Your brain will create all these chemicals, and you're like, oh my gosh, that feels so good. Yeah, I'm going to do that again. Yeah. Well, because you did something that you're proud of. You did something you're proud of. If you go to the gym today and you have a great workout, man, that felt really good. You get that chemical high, that great workout high. Man, I want to do that again. And so pride creates this feeling of wanting to do, of replication. So now I do it again. And so now you start doing this thing because you're proud of it over and over and over again. Well, eventually that conscious pride will create an unconscious habit. And so we got to get this streak of things I'm proud of. Well, the problem is that we forget all the great things we do every day. We look at the negatives that happen to us instead of saying, when I get in my car, I know I'm not pulling out of that spot until I can at least write down 3 things that I'm proud of. And if I do, it doesn't matter what happened throughout the day. I'm ending the day with 3 things I'm proud of. So now I'm in a good mood. I feel better. I got this chemical high. I drive home. Instead of yelling at the kids and kicking the dog and being in a bad mood and being the energy vampire, I now feel good. Yeah. I go home. I walk into the house with positive energy. I'm not the energy vampire.
Right.
I feel really proud of myself. People around that feel your energy never lies.
Yeah.
People will feel your energy before they ever hear your words. And so, to me, how do we get in a state of pride? And the four most important words in the human language, I believe, are I am, I did. So I is the creator word. M, whatever you say you are, is what you believe yourself to be. I, creator word, did action. So I am this and I did this. Not the circumstances this and the circumstances this.
Right.
Not that person did this and person. Like, I am worthy of a great life. I did show up and do this podcast today. I am worthy of being a great father. I am a great father, right? I had a great conversation with my daughters today. And so now you start training your brain to realize that you are the lead actor in your own movie. It's okay for the spotlight to be on me. It's okay to believe that I'm worthy of success. I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of contribution. That's what God created you for. And so for me, most people have enough gratitude. They just don't have enough pride in themselves.
So the name of your podcast is Cannonball Mindset.
Yeah.
The name of your company is Cannonball Moments.
Yeah.
It's kind of an odd name.
Yeah.
And of course I've read the book, so I know.
Yeah.
But what is Cannonball Moments, and how can we create more of them in our lives?
Yeah, I won't tell you the story, but I'll tell you what a cannonball moment is. A cannonball moment to me is a moment that you have complete clarity about what life is all about. And I think that God offers these moments all the time to us. But we're so fixated on looking at the wrong things that we stop and have appreciation for the things that matter most. And for me, it's a perfect moment of where appreciation, fulfillment, contribution, all the things you're created for in this life, where they all come together and it just clicks. It just makes sense. And so for me, I had this moment. I've had a million of these moments now because I'm more conscious about it. But most people, they don't cultivate these moments in their life. And they don't look for these moments. And I'll give you an example. I have a really good friend, Jesse Itzler, who wrote the foreword for my book. And Jesse Itzler, if you don't know who he is, he's amazing.
Yeah,
he's amazing in every sense of the word. And he's become a really, really good friend of mine, a really great mentor. He's married to Sarah Blakely, who owns Spanx. And I had a conversation with him. I talk about this in the book. I had a conversation with him at his house in Connecticut a couple of years ago, where he really educated on me on the value of time and moments. And he said, Chad, how many cannonball moments have you had this year? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, just write them down. Right now, just write down the moments you cultivated that you can remember. Now, there's two types of memories. There's memories that you create and memories that are created for you. If I said to you, what were you doing on September 11th when the world was attacked, when the United States was attacked? Do you know where you were?
Yes.
Where were you?
I was at Bel Air Elementary School, student teaching.
Student teaching.
Yep.
You'll never forget that. Agreed?
Correct.
Now,
Yep.
you had nothing to do with that moment. That memory. You didn't create that memory. You didn't choose. Like, it does. Even if you wanted to forget it, you would never be able to forget it. Right? Yep. You'll remember. Right. So those are one type of memories. Memories created for you, and then there's memories, quote unquote, cannonball moments you create for yourself. And so he said, I want you to write down all the cannonball moments you can remember this year. Now, I am very conscious of this. I mean, I am fixated on having cannonball moments, recognizing cannonball moments, and having appreciation for these moments of clarity, happiness, fulfillment. Right? So he goes, I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes. So I'm sitting at his kitchen island, right? And Sarah Blakely's there. I'm there. Like I'm gonna nail this, right? So I'm writing down these moments, and I get like 20.
Okay.
And he said, all right, great. And I don't know, this was maybe, let's say it's 5 years ago, I'm 45. And he said, do you know what the average life expectancy is in the United States? I said, yeah, 76. And he goes, all right, you're 45. So you have 31 years left. He said, so now let's take that 31 years, and let's say you have 20 cannonball moments in your life, 20 cannonball moments a year. That means 20 times 30 means you're going to have about 600 moments left. That's it. 600 memories left. Now, in those 30 years, you'll have 9,000 days, but you're only going to have 600 moments left. And it puts a real clarity on time. And so I had this cannonball moment. I describe it in the book. And when I started my company, I was having a conversation with my wife and kids about, I'm going to start my own company. This is 9-10 years ago. And I said, what should I call it? Well, some people call a consulting business, what my business is, right, a performance company, they name it after themselves. So I have this really long Chad Sanschagrin last name. It would be weird, right? So I know I'm not going to name it after myself. And my daughters go, well, you already know what you should name it. It's Cannonball Moments. That's what it is. It's your whole ethos, Dad. Yeah. That's all you talk about. That's all you talk about is creating. And because I promised my wife and kids that my life was going to be dedicated to creating Cannonball Moments. And Cannonball Moments don't have to be these big, elaborate vacations. This today is a Cannonball moment for me. Like, this is something I'll have complete appreciation for, that somebody said, hey, Chad, you have something that I think I want to hear. I want you to contribute. Like, that's, if I don't have appreciation for that, everything changes. And so for me, this is a hallmark moment, a Cannonball moment, a hallmark moment for me to sit down and appreciate, like, how did I get here? That I'm blessed enough to be on your show, have great conversation. And I think if you have more appreciation and awareness for these moments, it puts everything else into perspective. All the struggles you talk about can be undone if you have appreciation for these moments.
Wow. I'm going to remember this one. I mean, again, I've been following you for a while, and just appreciate all the content that you guys are putting out. Of course, appreciate the book and everything. Let's wrap this up with a few questions just to appreciate the time that you're here. You've interviewed a lot of well-known people. You mentioned Jesse Itzler, Gary Vee, Ryan Serhant. Some big names that I know and I follow.
Yeah.
What is one, if you could narrow it down to one or two things of each of those three guys that you got out of the conversation with them? Like what were some of those moments?
Yeah, so Gary Vee, who's become a great mentor of mine and a great human being. I never told anybody I didn't go to college. Like it was my biggest. If you knew me, you knew it. But on the podcast and my public speaking, I would not tell people because I was so ashamed because I thought it made me look less than. And I accidentally slipped in front of him and said, "I don't have a college degree." He goes, "You don't have a college degree?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." I would literally went like this. "Oh my God, I can't believe I told you that." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Well, I certainly would not offer that information up." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because doesn't that make me look less qualified?" He goes, "No. The fact that you're as successful as you are and you don't have a college degree, I'd wear that like a badge of honor." And I was like, "Wait, it's okay?" And I needed to be liberated by him he literally liberated me to, instead of looking at it as my greatest weakness, to look at it as one of my strengths. And it's me, my own dog food of everything I just said. Like, you can't rip out one chapter. And and so he brought that awareness. So he's a big guy in investing in your authentic self. Just be you. Just be okay with being you. So I've learned that from him. Jesse, I've learned probably the most from, because here's a guy who, is probably worth $1 billion at this point. I don't even know. But if you talk to him, if you go to his house in Atlanta, you walk into, his wife owns Spanx. You walk into the house and it's it's a nice house, but it's just like any other house. There's stuff on the kitchen island. There's pictures on the refrigerator. I was with him one time. I was in Atlanta, and I was at his house in Atlanta, and it was about 2:00. And he goes, "Hey Chad," he said, "hang out for a little bit. I'll be back in about 30 minutes." And I said, "Sure. You got to take a call or something?" He goes, "No, I got to go pick up my kids from school." I'm like, wait, what?
Right.
And then they're just normal people, just like us.
Right.
And it doesn't matter. Just be you. Don't let your ego get too big, and just be relatable. Yeah. And he's super relatable. He's a person of principle, not popularity. And because he's a man of principle, the popularity reigns through. So Jesse is a different human being than anybody I've ever met. Ryan Serhant, he's just, the guy's wicked smart. He's a branding genius. He's a marketing genius. He's probably not, and no offense if he ever sees this, but he's probably not the world's greatest real estate agent. He's just the world's greatest marketer. And he knows how to build relationship, and he knows how to build connection. Yeah. And I sat down. I spoke on a panel with him in New York City, and then we sat down and had dinner together afterwards, and we had such great conversation. And then through the dinner, I was like, "Hey, do you want to?" We talked about ice bath. I'm a big cold plunger and ice bather, and we were talking about him doing it. We talked about us running the New York City Marathon together, and we're having this conversation. And I was like, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" He goes, "Yeah, that'll be awesome. Can you come up next week?" I'm like, and he's like, if you make yourself available, he said, great things will happen to you. The problem is most people just don't make themselves available. So there's the thing about the podcast was, I went into this podcast. I'll give you a secret that I haven't told many people, and that is my podcast is 8 years old, whatever it is, 7, 8 years old. We've interviewed some of the most amazing people in the world, right? And we're getting ready to go interview in California in a couple weeks. We're getting ready to do a whole nother batch of interviews, which is going to be unbelievable. And in 8 years, there's only one person that knows how many downloads it's ever had. I've never looked at any of the statistics for the podcast. Not one. Not once, ever. Yeah. Only Ben knows, and Ben knows he'll get fired if he tells me. I don't want to know.
Right.
Because whatever it is, my ego won't be able to handle it. Right. It'll be either too many or too little, and it'll delete and it'll get rid of the reason I have the podcast. Now, data is really important if I'm trying to monetize this, if I'm trying to grow my popularity from it. The reason I have the podcast is just because I want to learn from great people. That's it. And so it's very selfish reason I started the podcast. It was just because I read people's books, so I followed them, I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
So I created a system where I could build these relationships with these people. That's why all of our podcasts are in person.
Yep.
I'll fly to wherever they are. I'll film wherever they are. I'll absorb the expense because the ROI on the relationship of what I learn will pay for it tenfold, right? And so it doesn't matter how many people watch it. Now, some people would say, Chad, that's naive, that's ignorance. I have a circle of influencers that I can call at any one time and say, I'm speaking on a panel in 3 weeks with Ed Milet. You know how many questions I'm going to ask of Ed Milet? I'm saying it's going to be ridiculous. And he'll be on my podcast. I'll build a relationship with him. I don't care if anybody listens to it but my mother.
Can I come with you to meet Ed Milet?
He's unbelievable.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah. And so these things are happening. And so sometimes you just have to, and all the time, you just have to be willing to put yourself in the right situation and surround yourself with people that are willing to give you the information, pour into you. And for me, from every one of those people I've ever interviewed, and I think we're up to a little over 100 people, I've learned a lot. And a culmination of all those people have gotten me to where I am today.
If I had the power to, and you, of course, you know a heck of a lot more influential people than I do.
Yeah.
But if I had the power to introduce to you one person that you would want to sit down and have an interview with, who could I introduce you to?
Well, my ultimate interview in my life, dead or alive, would be Jesus, of course, because all things happen through him. But the person I would want to interview the most, I would say Tony Robbins, but I've already met him, and he hasn't been on my podcast, but I've known him and I've had great conversations with him.
Sure.
I'm going to say right now, it would probably be today. It would be Andy Frisella. And Andy Frisella is a guy who has a thing called the Andy Frisella podcast, and that's just because I'm getting ready to do 75 hard again for the seventh time.
I saw that. I've done it twice.
Yeah,
I've done it twice.
So what happens is when I'm curious about something. See, the greatest thing about curiosity is it gives us focus for free. And so when I'm curious about something, I go down a rabbit hole on it.
Okay.
So like right now, I'm curious about getting my health back to where it needs to be. That's why I'm doing 75 hard. So if I'm really focused on 75 hard and getting disciplined, then I'm going to go to where the most disciplined person is. I'm like, all right, how do I get Andy on my podcast? If there's this super badass woman, her name is Cody Sanchez. So Cody Sanchez she might be one of the most ridiculous people I've ever listened to. She's now on my list because I'm so obsessed with her way of thinking about entrepreneurship that she will come on. And I haven't met her.
Right.
But I can already tell you, in 2025, she will 100% be on my podcast. I don't know how. I'm going to make it happen. But I'm as sure as I'm sitting here today, I'm going to figure out how to get her on my podcast. And by the end of the year, she'll be on my podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in the ego sense. It's like, I'm curious about it. I'm going to figure out what the third door is. I'm going to get into it. And
Third door.
Third door, one of my favorite books.
That's a great book.
Yeah. And so to me, I think that, yes. So to answer your question, Andy Frisella would be the person.
Andy Frisella. Yeah. And of course, if you're going to be seeing Ed Milet in 3 weeks, those guys are.
That's the way it works. It's the way it works. Like, you meet Ed Milet, you get Ed Milet on your show, you do really good. He introduces you to Andy introduces you. Like Gary's introduced me to a ton of people. And I have a great podcast and I've had a ton of amazing guests. But I tell you, I probably still get turned down 50% of the time. Really? I still get blanked.
How do you approach that? Do you send them an email? Do you slide into their DMs?
Sometimes. Well, first I'll slide into their DMs first. That doesn't work as much anymore because it's easy access for everybody.
Yeah.
But I'll put myself in a situation where, like, I'll give you examples of the Ed Milet thing, right? So I was asked to speak at this panel. Ed Milet is speaking. Now, in order for me to get there, I have to fly from Denver. I do a whole day seminar. Fly from Denver to Charlotte, and then I'll have dinner with this private dinner for 20 or 50 people. Ed will be there. I'll speak on the panel with Ed at my cost, by the way. Then I'll ask Ed to be on the podcast. After the dinner, I'll immediately fly back to California. So I'll go right past Denver. So I'm going to put myself in some really tough, uncomfortable situations for the opportunity to meet Ed.
Yeah.
For the opportunity that he might come on my podcast.
Okay.
That the opportunity, so it's really putting yourself. Are you willing? Most people want the external reward of whatever it is they want, but they're not willing to do all the sacrifice work.
Yep.
If I say I want something, then I'm going to do whatever's required to make that happen. And I don't say that again to impress, but to impress upon you. There's always a way to make whatever you want happen. The question is, how hard are you willing to work for it?
Yeah. Well, I've learned in your book that you're an avid reader, and and at the end of every chapter you give kind of like a book recommendation of something. What's a book that you've read that has impressed a lot upon you that you didn't mention in the book? I know.
Yeah.
Could you narrow that down to just one?
The Bible is not in this book. The Bible is
okay.
All right, but I think that's
a given.
You're given. Right? Yeah. That's an easy answer. Yeah. I reference the book The Chosen in the book by Edith Eger, which is it is the number one book I've read in my entire life besides the Bible. Is The Choice. The Choice by Dr. Edith Eger. It's the best book I've ever read, hands down. But there's another book called Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning is Viktor Frankl's version of The Choice. They're both Holocaust survivors, different stories. So I think the Man's Search for Meaning is not in the book. I think that's probably the most influential book in my life besides this. I would also say there's a really good book that I just finished last week, and it's called Surrounded by Idiots. Surrounded by Idiots is such a great book. It's it's a way to really dissect and understand people's different personalities, and how to deal with those personalities. Okay. That was a great book. Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. Probably a fundamental reading that every single human being should read. Kids should have to read that, and how our biases really screw us up. So Mistakes Were Made, Not by Me. I could probably go on, but the most influential books I've read are in this book. Which is crazy because I didn't read my first book until I was 25 years old, and now I read 3 books at all time. I always have 3 books.
3 books,
yeah, right now.
Very similar. I hated reading when I was a kid, and I read The Catcher in the Rye. That was the first book that I read all the way through. Really? And then from there, it just took off, and now I read a lot of personal development stuff.
You know what's funny? What's ironic? You said that. It dawned on me the other day. All the reading I've done, I never went back and read the books that most kids read when they were in school. So I never read Catcher in the Rye. I never read Of Mice and Men. I've never read the books that you were supposed to read in school.
That were mandatory. Yeah.
And so that really should be a goal of mine. I was like sitting on a plane the other day. I was like, I should create a list of books that every high schooler has read, but I haven't. And I've read thousands of books, but I've never went back and read the required reading. And I should make up for it now and go back and read.
Well, there you go. Now. Well, this one right here is required reading for everybody. It's where can people buy the book? Actually, it's in Barnes & Noble, right? I think I saw on your stories.
Yeah, it's in all Barnes & Nobles across the country. It was just named a USA Today best-selling book. It's Amazon. It's all the things. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy to walk into a bookstore and see your book on the shelves, and I have a goal. When I decided I was going to write a book. I travel. I do about 180 flights a year, and there's here in BWI Airport. There's a bookstore. There's a Hudson News in Gate C, and for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I've been going to that airport. I was traveling much as I have. I'd walk down the hallway, and there's a window. There's a window with a whole bunch of books in it. And for 7 years, I'd stop at that every week. Stop at that window anytime I flew out of the Seagate, and I'd look at that window, and I'd see my book sitting on the shelf. Now, my book wasn't actually sitting there. I didn't even know what it looked like.
Sure.
But I knew that one day I was going to walk past that bookstore, and my book was going to be in that window. Even when things were bad, even when things were great, it didn't matter. I'd stop at that window, and I'd look in that bookstore. I'd look in that window, and I'd see my book in that window. And it hasn't happened yet because those bookstores only carry the top selling. I made the best-selling list. We were the number 2 or number 3 business book last week in the country, but it hasn't made it to that window yet. But I'm manifesting that day will be a big shift moment in my life when I walk by and I see that book in that window.
It's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
It'll be a big moment in my life. I can tell you when I see that book in the window.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I love the social medias. I know people hate social media. I love social media, and with anything there's good and bad. I love social media because it gives me what I need most. And what I mean by that is it's amazing. If you do like a little social experiment, go on Facebook tonight and say something positive, right? Just work, even if you have a negative day, just write something not positive. Like, man, the world is great, or man, life is good. Just write anything. Just be generic, right? Man, you will get it back tenfold.
Yeah.
You will get it at levels you could never imagine. People are like, yeah, it was great. And people will flock to that. But if you go on and you're having a crappy day and you put something negative on social media, man, you'll get that tenfold too because you attract what you put out in the world. But one of the reasons I love social media, and I know it has this problem, but one of the reasons I love social media is because there are days that I'm not feeling great. There's days where the critic is louder. There's days when I'm in the ditch, when I'm feeling that imposter syndrome. And I can go to social media and I can find what I focus on. And if I want to focus on, I want to be in the ditch further, man, I can find it. And it can bury me down. I can feel collaborative, and I can feel one with other victims. Or I can work up just 10 seconds of insane courage, 10 seconds of just like, let me just put this negative critic on hold and just work up the courage to type something positive on social media.
Yeah.
And instantaneously, I'll get, man, yeah, it's a really great day. Like, man, I'm having great wins here, and it can help you out of the ditch. And I think that the thing with me is that I'm so big on social media because I want to attract what I put out in the world. I want to put greatness out in the world, and I want to get greatness back. That's why I'm very careful. If anybody posts anything negative, I unfollow. So my feed isn't filled with any negativity at all.
Yeah.
It's only filled with positivity. And so for me, when I need those moments of support, man, I just put it out. So you can connect with me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok. I have them all.
TikTok's back.
Oh, TikTok's
Come
back.
on.
I'm big on TikTok. I know people, I'm sure the Chinese are hacking into my whatever, but
they know who you are.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, let them know who I am. I'm sure. What's crazy is I saw this today. I'm not a huge political person. I'm right down the middle, but I saw people railing against Mark Zuckerberg, who like the founder of Facebook or owner.
Yeah.
And they were railing against him on Facebook. And I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't understand it. Like,
right.
You hate the guy so much, but you're supporting him by using his platform.
Correct.
Right? I don't
Correct.
like it didn't make sense to
Yes.
me. Like
yes. Correct.
So if I totally disagree with something, I'm not going to support it.
Yeah.
And so I think that, for me, if you hate Facebook, you're probably not going to be on it. But if you love Facebook and love social media, then connect with me on there because I love people in my community.
Yeah. Chad, it's been an honor to have you on the podcast.
I appreciate
it. You've added up to everything that I've thought about this coming into it, from everything that I've been following, the energy that you're putting out there, the positivity, the book. Again, I can't say enough about the book. Everything that you've done leading up to right now is just, it's phenomenal. And I wanted to acknowledge you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I literally get emotional because the idea that, like, it means a lot for you to ask me to be on this show. I don't take that lightly, that somebody's saying, hey, I have invested in this project. I've invested in my time, in my network, in building something, and we think you have something to contribute. And that means a lot to me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the size of the podcast. It doesn't matter who the podcast is. When anybody asks you to contribute, ask me to contribute, it means a lot. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day to have me on your show and to not to validate what I wrote or what I believe, but to allow me into your community. There's no bigger ask of somebody to say, hey, have influence in my life over, we talked about off camera, we talked about coaching basketball, and I never took for granted that somebody's parent was going to allow me to influence their children. Mm-hmm. And we have, I own this huge performance company. We deal with thousands of people every week, and these owners trust us with all of their employees to pour into them. Mm-hmm. And that's a big ask. Yeah. That's a big ask to allow somebody to influence somebody in your life. And so the fact that you felt safe enough or strong enough to allow me to influence your people, it really does mean a lot. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I hope people have found value in this, and if they have, please share this out. Please share this out. Please pick up the book. Let other people know about it. If you're not following us yet, we are on Facebook and Instagram at The Markland Advantage, and we're on TikTok and YouTube too, and everywhere.
You can find them everywhere.
You can download this podcast anywhere you listen to them, and so please follow us there. Chad Sanschagrin.
Appreciate it, brother.
Hey, thank you so much. Until next time, live your life to the fullest, and we'll see you soon. Take care.